And my guest today is Bill Blain, who is the founder of Windshift Capital. And Bill, this week you put out a newsletter, which was literally like fingernails on the blackboard, which of course is something that you're good at, talking about Elon Musk buying Boeing. But perhaps for our audience's help here, tell us a little bit about how you come to be interested in aviation and aerospace.
Sure, and thanks so much for inviting me on, Addison. It's a real pleasure. I should say that much of what I know about aviation is garnered from what you tell me and your writing. So I got to give you credit for a lot of my
Careful now, no one's going to
interest.
listen to you anymore.
Well, there you go. No, but my interest in aviation is because Windshift Capital is a business.
You cut off the sound.
Apologies. Can you cut back?
Just go ahead.
Yeah, let me tell you about Windshift Capital. Our role is to advise investors on alternative assets, by which we mean real assets, which may be private equity, venture capital, but the hottest area is, of course, private debt. And over the last 10 years, the aviation market has been a great source of private capital deals. And I've always had my own personal interest in aviation. As a small boy, I think I built every single Airfix model. That's a European brand of 172 scale planes. My dad worked in the aviation industry designing, I think, every single radar that ever went into a Royal Air Force plane. And my whole life, whenever I step on board a plane, I'm always fascinated to know which one it is. So it was great fun getting involved in aviation. The last couple of years, of course, have been absolutely fascinating. Following the pandemic and the supply chain issues and all the things that were going on at Boeing, myself and some colleagues from the leasing market decided the market to get into was mid-life aircraft, and that's been an absolute corker of a trade, as I'm sure you're aware. In fact, the problem is not that it's not a great idea, it's the problem of being able to source the aircraft to put into that trade. But otherwise, I also do a lot of stuff in other infrastructure and transportation. For instance, at the moment, I'm doing a deal which is in methane powered ships. Now, that is effectively green shipping because we're using green methane, which is zero carbon. Um, I also do stuff in venture capital, in medtech and biotech. I'm doing a big deal in sports. And I get involved in UK property, which is a fantastic market and one that I love just now because we're right at the bottom of the despondency curve when it comes to the asset. Now, as well as being involved in the alternative asset world, one of the other things I do is I write a morning commentary called Blain's Morning Porridge. And I started doing it about 17 years ago in the middle of the great financial crisis so that I had something to talk to my clients about. I very quickly discovered if you send them a note explaining the market, they will then be quite happy to tell you how wrong you are. And as soon as they tell you how wrong you are, you've got a conversation going. And once you have a conversation going, you can often end up doing a trade with them. But the morning porridge has kind of spiraled now, and it goes to over 10,000, mostly investors, but also regulators, politicians, central bankers, and a lot of journalists. So I probably get more than my fair share of coverage because of the morning porridge. And to be honest, I absolutely love writing it every morning. And as you know, Edison, about once a fortnight, I'll have a comment on aviation. And it's usually to talk about Boeing. And I better be honest with all your listeners, I have gone out many times and described Boeing as the worst company in the world. And it's become that way because ever since the company was acquired by McDonnell Douglas using Boeing's money, it's gone from being the greatest aviation engineering company to being run by cost accountants who have frankly made an absolute Horlicks, which is a horrible British drink, of the whole thing. So I often go out and talk about what an absolute disaster Boeing is.
Okay, so the credentials that's some good credentials there. You came to the US about a week ago to visit with some colleagues or professional colleagues prior to the election, and then you had this interesting idea.
Well, the whole story of that is a lot of my clients. I mean, I do have a lot of American clients, including a bunch of folk in the hedge fund and tech industry. And one of them asked me to come over for the election. I had to literally sing for my supper. I was asked to make a speech at a dinner that would describe what was going to happen to the European relationship or what the expectations were. And then I was asked to stay for the party. And, it was absolutely fascinating being in Washington for the evening. I actually did a hit for UK TV at about midnight, at which point the calculations at the party I was at were showing Harris may just have squeaked a 270 win. And then, of course, half an hour after that, it became clear that she was losing badly. But we went all through the evening. It was very, very interesting. And unfortunately, I had to fly back to London the next evening for a meeting. But we went out for a brunch, and brunches are a very bad idea when you have Scotsmen involved. So the brunch very quickly went into we needed espresso martinis to wake up. And I was chatting to this other US investor, and he was asking me what people thought of Musk being so influential in the election. And we chatted a bit about that. And I turned around and said, you know what? Musk is pretty spectacular. He may not be your cup of tea, and frankly, there are things he's done that absolutely appall me, but he is proving himself to be absolutely spectacular in the way that he's been able to make SHIT happen at Tesla and the way that he's driven SpaceX to become what it is, and then all the other things he's got his finger in. And I just turned around to this guy and said, you know what? When Musk gets pushed aside by Trump, as will probably happen because he's getting all the media spotlight that Trump craves, he should think about buying Boeing. And this very senior US investor turned round and looked at me like I'd sprouted two heads and horns and said, that's ridiculous. And then he went, that's the best idea I've ever had. Now, I've got to be honest, Addison, we were fueled by espresso martinis at this point, and I did have to get a flight back to London quite soon after. But we just talked through it. And if you actually think through the logic, at the moment, the market cap of Boeing is about 112 billion. If you do the math, Musk has made, since he went all in on Trump, which really began even before he endorsed Trump the day of the assassination attempt. Since then, Trump has made, I reckon, somewhere in the region of 91 billion from
Trump
the 100. Musk.
Musk.
Musk has made somewhere in the region of 91 billion from his 22% stake in Tesla. Now, that is a fantastic return on the 175 million investment into Trump's PACs, I think you call them. Now, he's the richest man on the planet. He has a clear reputation for delivery. He is building this reputation with his new role in the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge or Doggy, whatever you pronounce it. And if anyone was to go in and transform Boeing from what it has become, which is a very muddled, cost-controlled bureaucracy that is struggling with its workers, struggling with financing new designs, lacks the reputation for engineering brilliance it once had, has lost its way with consumers and the airline clients. If there was ever a way to totally shake up, create a complete paradigm shift, it would be for Musk to turn in and do what Musk does. He makes things happen. Love him or loathe him, you've got to respect that guy's ability for making things happen. Now, one of the most interesting things about Musk, which you very seldom hear about, is the people who are backing him up. his lieutenants, they are all superb at delivery. They're the guys that make Musk as figurehead of the whole thing and the brains behind it effective. Now, what I'm thinking here is, what are the long-term challenges for Boeing? Well, it's got to fix all its labor relations for a start. That's underway, but it's going to take time. It's got to restore its reputation for safety. It's got to restore its deliverability. We are talking about, remind me what the numbers are, Addison, but it's something like 40,000 new aircraft for the global market in the next 20 years. I think in October, and you are the man who can tell me, they delivered 11 aircraft?
14.
14 aircraft. Come on, that's just, you are not going to deliver 20,000 new aircraft in 20 years, Boeing's half of its market duopoly, if they're delivering 14 aircraft a month. Clearly, it's going to change. But imagine if Musk was to come in, completely revamp, retrain, retool, re-empower the workforce, put the engineers back in charge, and keep tight control of the bureaucracy. And now this is one of the things I keep hearing from disaffected current and former Boeing employees, is just how impossible. It's like swimming through treacle, as we say here in the UK. It's very difficult to get things done. You've got to reinvent and rejig that whole organization. So we've talked about safety, we've talked about engineering, and the final part of that is, what does the world desperately need? It doesn't need Boeing Maxes, although I see there is a new order for 80 aircraft from Avia coming in. What the world really needs is a successor to the Boeing 737, a plane that is going to be fuel efficient and is going to re-establish them in the market. And who would be better to force through the design and innovation than Musk? Now, at the moment, Boeing does not have the wherewithal to deliver a new design, which is going to cost, what, 60 billion, 70 billion to introduce and fly and to get through the FAA. It's 50, 60 billion dollars. What do you reckon?
Well, there's a range. Some people think it's much lower than that. But let's
I'll
take
tell you
50 as a
what, I'll
number.
bet you that Elon Musk can deliver it much lower than that, but Boeing won't.
Well, there's some merit in what you're saying. I like the idea of cutting the Gordian knot, because there's clearly there's a lot of stuff that how do you get this out of the way? So some pushback on some of the things you said. For example, despite all the things people have to say about the Max is in its class. The Max 9 and the Max 8 are the most fuel efficient in their categories on a per seat mile basis. That data shows that they're lighter than their competitor, and they carry nearly the same amount of people, and so they're very fuel efficient. So
yeah, but do people
mean,
really want to fly them? I mean,
well,
when I get on a
that's a separate question. That's a separate.
Yeah, but look, when I get
brand
on a flight,
image.
if I get on a flight and it's a Boeing 737, the first thing I do is I don't even check the card, because I know European airlines have taken out the safety card that says Max and replaced it with a 800 safety card. That happened to me in a flight last year.
And you survived.
Yeah, I survived. God, I had skin in my teeth and luck. I don't want to fly in a Max. It's the design, the basic look. I think actually, I remember reading, and I think I am actually about a month older than the Boeing 737. It's 62 years old.
It looks better than you do, Bill.
Yeah, that's fair. It's better preserved.
So okay, moving further forward though. So yes, I think everybody would concur that updating the 737 with something new is a very important thing. But here's the thing. Why would the United States allow that, having so many eggs in one basket?
Well, there is more that I think makes it even more appealing for Musk to do it, because so far all we've talked about is commercial aviation. But I think there are two other things that Musk has clearly got his eye on. The first is space. Musk has recognized the value of space, and that's not just in terms of Starlink and his constellation of satellites, I'm pretty sure that, love him or loathe him, as I keep saying, Musk is going to dominate internet provision through Starlink, and it's going to become cheaper than any of the other. I mean, he's taken a commodity and he's made it cheaper through Starlink. The potential of space in other commercial forms is only just being explored, whether that's as a manufacturing opportunity. And you know what? SpaceX has the capability to deliver platforms into space. And then in terms of space for defense, Musk again could dominate that space. And that leads us into the third area, which is Boeing's defense industry. I mean, Boeing is one of the major primes, and we know that the military-industrial complex in the States, together with the Pentagon, has become one of the most supreme bureaucracies on the planet. There's a great book that came out recently. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. It's called Unitex, and it's all about the Pentagon's efforts to engage with Silicon Valley, because they kind of realized that they were producing the best fighter jet on the planet, but because the computer systems were designed 12 years before it finally flew, it didn't even have a moving map on it, so the pilot couldn't tell him where it was. So bringing in new thinking and not missing everything that's gone on in the tech world, whether that's the cloud or AI, whatever, and making that front and foremost in the defense industry makes it all look terribly interesting, I think, to people like Musk. I mean, if you take a look at the entrepreneurs who are all over Donald Trump like a rash at the moment, they are guys like Musk, Thiel, Andreessen, Ackman, and they are all very interested in the potential of defense. So there's three good reasons why this should make enormous sense to Musk. But your question was, would anyone allow this to happen? Well, if Boeing doesn't get itself sorted out, the military-industrial complex aspect of Boeing means that it would, I was never worried about Boeing going bankrupt. But I could definitely see a situation where the military industrial complex part would be bought out and set up as a separate business, because it is so vital to America's strategic interest. But the current mood, clearly, in the new government that you have coming in place, is to free up private enterprise. And I think, you can hear by my accent, I'm a Scotsman. That means genetically I'm a lefty. But I think that a freed up private enterprise defense sector would be amazingly transformational for the whole US defense industry. And it would put the living fear of God into the Russians and the Chinese if it was properly freed up. The inventiveness, the innovation that guys like Musk could bring to it and break away from the bureaucracy that currently dominates procurement.
It's interesting you bring up the bureaucracy thing, because that's one of his new gigs, right? Is
exactly
getting rid of that bureaucracy.
Yeah. I mean, I would really recommend. I wish I could find the book, Unit X. Here it is here. Yeah, Unit X by Raj M. Shah and Christopher Kirchhoff. One of the most interesting books I've read recently. It's all about trying to get the Pentagon and Silicon Valley to transform the future of American defense and warfare. And it is an absolute cracker. I can't recommend it to people highly enough.
Fascinating. So I'm thinking about how I'm going to come back to this, because I can imagine there. I remember learning in sociology, my first year at university. I learned a fascinating thing in small group theory, where the very first thing an organization will do once it comes into being, its very first and most prominent act is to protect itself from anything else. And the logic of that is just so, it's proven itself over and over again that once you have any kind of organism, it defends itself against everything. And bureaucracy is no different. So I don't know how you break this bureaucracy, whether it's the bureaucracy of Boeing, the bureaucracy of the military industrial complex, the Pentagon. These structures are fragile. They're not malleable.
Yeah, and that's why this is the time for this to happen, because we're going through a real paradigm shift in the States just now in terms of politics. I mean, Trump is completely changing the equation. Now, it may swing back, but there's an opportunity for the what looks incredible to happen. And so normally you would think that a single entrepreneur taking over in a position like this and being so critical to part of the one of the most successful businesses, aviation in the States, to its defense sector, you know, that's unprecedented. But the thing is, it's not. And I'm thinking here back 80 years ago in the UK, 1940, before, as usual, the Americans turned up late to the Second World War, you know, we were off there fighting ourselves. And one guy, a Canadian fellow, Lord Beaverbrook, he was given complete control of the aviation industry to deliver the Spitfires and the Hurricanes that won the Battle of Britain and went on that the most amount of money spent during the war was on Bomber Command, a program that he personally financed, well, not personally with his own money, but he financed to make happen. And it turned the RAF, which was a tiny fledgling force with the benefit of great organization, great officers, and radar, into the most powerful air force in the world by the end of the Second World War. You know, winning the war. Yeah, we had great help from the 8th Air Force, which was critical, but the RAF was unbeatable by the end of the Second World War because of the way that one man had taken over the means of production, the whole supply of aviation, and that fellow was Lord Beaverbrook. I'm not saying that Musk is equivalent to Beaverbrook, but apparently Beaverbrook was a very outspoken, very narcissistic Canadian, and I think he probably had a lot in common with Musk.
Fascinating idea, Bill. I wonder how people are going to react to this idea.
Well, I just think it's a great idea to throw out there. I mean, I'm sure there are reasons it won't happen. And by even saying it, we probably make it improbable because the way the markets are just now, they will latch on to any story and drive it higher. So as soon as there's even a hint that Musk is looking at Boeing, there you go, you buy Boeing. Now, my own history investing in Boeing has been mixed. A couple of earlier this year, when we saw all the management changes going on, and you and I discussed it at the time, I went in and I said to myself, you know what? This might be the bottom of the despondency curve, as we call it in Boeing. Just when things look bleakest, that's when you invest. But you know what? Things got worse. It doesn't help when doors fall off airplanes. It doesn't help when you have a strike and already it's under the cosh from the FAA for safety inspections. But perhaps we are at the bottom of the despondency curve with Boeing now. And one of the things is under this new environment of government efficiency and Donald Trump's support for private enterprise and the need for America to rethink all its defense strategies and incorporate them into what Silicon Valley has been able to create in tech, maybe this is the time for something radical, as somebody like Elon Musk taking Boeing on board and its superb position in space, defense, and commercial airliners and making the thing work again.
Wow, fascinating. Thanks for the call, sir.
I absolutely loved it. Thanks very much. And if it happens, I'll be asking Elon to pay me fees on the idea. Yeah, dream on, Bill.
All right.